Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really fascinating story from ancient India, from the time of the Buddha.
Right. We're talking about Suppabuddha.
Exactly. His story is, well, it seems full of contradictions. He has this amazing spiritual breakthrough, but then meets this very sudden, violent end.
Yeah, it's quite puzzling on the surface.
So our mission today is to kind of unravel that. We're using excerpts from a text, the Suppabuddhakut Vatthu.
And these texts tell us the Buddha was staying at the Vaiphana monastery at the time. It gives us a real sense of place.
It does. It sets the scene. And we want to understand, what happened to Suppabuddha, the lessons there, and maybe some surprising connections about actions and consequences.
Karma, essentially. There's a deep dive into how that plays out.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Suppabuddha, he has leprosy, and he's listening to the Buddha teaching. But he's kind of on the outskirts of the crowd.
Mm-hmm. You have to imagine, with leprosy back then, he'd likely be ostracized, kept separate, so he's listening from a distance.
But even from the edge, something profound happens.
It really does. He's listening, absorbing the Dhamma, and boom, he attains the Sottapati fruit.
Stream entry. That's a really significant first stage of awakening, right?
Absolutely. It's a huge breakthrough. Irreversible, in fact.
Wow. So you can imagine how he felt. The text says he was filled with gratitude, wanted to tell the Buddha.
Yeah, a powerful urge to share this incredible experience.
But then there's that hesitation again. His condition, the social reality of it.
Right. He doesn't feel he can just walk into the middle of the assembly. There's this internal conflict almost. Inner joy versus external reality.
So what does he do?
Well, he pays his respects from where he is, from a distance. A very moving image, I think.
Yeah.
And then later, he decides to follow the Buddha back towards the monastery, but discreetly.
Okay, so he's had this profound experience, he's full of faith, and then things get weird.
Enter Sakka.
King of the gods. So Sakka somehow knows about Suppabuddha's attainment.
Apparently so. The texts often depict Sakka as being aware of significant spiritual events happening among humans, especially those connected to the Buddha's teaching.
And his goal here is what? To congratulate him.
Not exactly. It seems more like a test. Sakka often shows up in these stories to test the resolve of practitioners.
Right. So how does he test Suppabuddha?
Well, first, Sakka appears dramatically up in the sky, and he addresses Suppabuddha pretty harshly, calling him poor and wretched.
Ouch. And then comes the offer.
Then comes the offer. Immense wealth, riches beyond belief.
Okay, but there's got to be a catch.
Oh, there's a huge catch.
Yeah.
Sakka says, I'll give you all this if you deny the Buddha, if you renounce the Dhamma, the teachings, and give up the Sangha, the community.
Wow. That's the ultimate test of faith right there.
Exactly. He's basically asking Suppabuddha to trade his spiritual attainment for material wealth.
How does Suppabuddha react? Does he even consider it?
Not for a second. His response is immediate. First, he asks, who are you?
And when Sakka identifies himself,
Suppabuddha just lays into him, calls him an andhabala ahirika, like a blind fool with no sense of shame.
strong words.
Yeah.
Especially to the king of the gods.
Absolutely. It shows incredible conviction.
Okay.
And then he directly challenges Sakka's judgment.
He says he's not poor and wretched.
Precisely.
Uh-huh.
He says, you call me poor, let me tell you what real wealth is.
Okay. This is the core of it.
Yes, he lists the 7 noble treasures. There's Tadahana, faith,
Okay.
Saladhana, virtue or morality,
Right.
Hira, which is like an inner sense of moral shame, knowing right from wrong, Altapiyatana, moral dread, the fear of the consequences of wrongdoing,
I see.
Sutahananya, the wealth of learning, of hearing the Dhamma,
Makes sense.
Kagapa, generosity, the willingness to give,
Okay.
and finally, Panya, wisdom, understanding.
So those are his treasures, not gold or jewels.
Exactly. He says, that's true wealth. And he even recites a verse saying anyone, man or woman, who has these 7 treasures, they are not poor. The wise, even Buddhas, don't consider them poor. Their life isn't wasted.
That's incredibly powerful, a complete rejection of Sakka's materialistic view.
Totally. Sakka is silenced, basically. He hears this, realizes Suppabuddha's faith is unshakable.
And he leaves.
He leaves and goes straight to the Buddha to report the whole conversation.
What does the Buddha say about it?
The Buddha confirms Suppabuddha's strength. He tells Sakka, essentially, you could send hundreds, even thousands like yourself, and you wouldn't be able to make Suppabuddha renounce his refuge in the triple gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
It really underlines how deep that stream entry experience goes. It's not just a fleeting feeling.
No, it's a fundamental reorientation.
So, after all this drama with Sokka, Suppabuddha does eventually go see the Buddha.
Yes, shortly after. He goes to the monastery. The Buddha welcomes him warmly.
And Suppabuddha tells him about attaining stream entry.
He does, shares his realization with the Buddha.
And then he leaves the assembly, probably feeling, affirmed, peaceful.
You would think so. But this is where the story takes that incredibly sharp, tragic turn.
What happens?
Just after leaving the Buddha, the text says he's killed, gored by a young cow.
What? Just like that, after everything.
Just like that. Sudden, violent, and seemingly completely random.
Wow. Okay, that needs explaining. The monks must have been shocked.
Deeply shocked and confused. They go to the Buddha and ask, what just happened? How could this happen to someone who just attained stream entry? And also, why did he have leprosy in the first place? Two big questions.
Right. Cause and effect.
Exactly. And this is where the Buddha explains the role of karma, stretching back into past lives.
Okay, so the leprosy and the death are connected to past actions.
Yes. The Buddha reveals that both his condition and his sudden death were the results, the ripening of negative actions from a long, long time ago.
And the cow? Was it just a random cow?
No. Nothing is truly random in this framework. The Buddha reveals the cow was actually a yakini.
A spirit. Like a vengeful spirit.
Often, yes.
So?
In this cosmology, yakinis can be powerful and sometimes malevolent beings. And this particular yakini was enacting retribution.
Retribution for what?
For something that happened in a deep past life. The Buddha tells this whole backstory.
Okay, let's hear it.
Ages ago, this yakini had been a human, a courtesan in a beautiful city.
Right.
And 4 young men, sons of wealthy merchants, spent a day with her in a garden, paid her 1,000 kahapanas.
Sounds pleasant enough so far.
It was. Until the evening. The 4 men decided they didn't want to part with the money or her jewelry.
Oh, no.
They thought they were alone, so they plotted to kill her and take everything back.
How awful.
But she overheard their plan. And as they were killing her, she made this incredibly strong, vengeful wish.
What did she wish for?
She wished to be reborn as a powerful yakini, strong enough to hunt them down and kill them life after life in the same way they kill her.
Wow, that's intense karmic debt being set up there.
Hugely intense, and the Buddha connects it all. He says this yakini, fulfilling her vow, was reborn again and again.
And eventually as this cow.
Initially as this cow, and this cow, embodying that ancient vengeful energy, was responsible for the deaths not just of Suppabuddha.
Wait, there are others?
Yes. 3 others mentioned, Pukasati, Bahia Darukiria, and a robber named Tambadehika. The yakini, reborn as this cow, kill each of them, apparently for 100 lifetimes each.
100 lifetimes each.
Yeah, that's what the text suggests. A cycle of retribution playing out over vast stretches of time.
And Suppabuddha, Pukasati, Bahia, and Tambadahika. They were
the 4 sons of the merchants from that past life, the ones who murdered the courtesan.
So Suppabuddha's death, while shocking after his attainment, was the karmic consequence of that ancient act finally ripening in this lifetime.
Precisely. It shows how karma operates. Actions have consequences, sometimes very delayed, very complex consequences that span lifetimes. His stream entry couldn't erase the karmic debt, though it ensured his future path towards liberation.
That's a really crucial distinction. Okay, so the Buddha explains all this history.
Yes, connecting the dots, showing how beings wander through existence, experiencing the often bitter results of their own past unskillful deeds.
And he uses a verse to kind of hammer the point home.
He does. A verse from the Dhammapada, it goes, Karantibalo dumeda, amitineva atana, karantopapaka kama, yahutika kafolanti.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Karantibalo dumeda means the foolish wander, those lacking wisdom, those who don't know what's good for them in this life or the next.
Okay.
Amitineva atana, by oneself as if by an enemy, meaning they act as their own worst enemy through their actions.
Right. Self-inflicted harm.
Exactly. Karantapapakakamai, doing bad deeds, unwholesome actions.
And the result?
Yahoti kakafalanti, which has a bitter fruit, whose result is suffering.
So foolish, unwise people wander around harming themselves with bad actions that inevitably lead to suffering.
That's the essence of it. A stark warning about the consequences of our choices.
And the story says that hearing this explanation, many people in the audience actually had their own spiritual breakthroughs.
Yes, many attain Sotapadhi, stream entry, or other stages of awakening. Understanding this deep connection between actions and results, even the harsh aspects, was itself liberating for them.
So looking back at the whole story, what are the big takeaways?
Well, first, Suppabuddha's incredible inner resilience, spiritual strength despite terrible physical suffering.
Yeah, his faith was amazing, especially against Sokka's temptation.
Right. That highlights the difference between, fleeting material wealth and lasting spiritual wealth.
Yeah.
Sokka's failure proves the power of Suppabuddha's inner treasures.
And then there's the really sobering part, the karma, the long reach of past actions.
Absolutely. His sudden death is a powerful, if harsh, illustration of how karma works. Spiritual attainment doesn't just wipe the slate clean of past negative actions immediately. Their results can still manifest.
It's that contrast again, outwardly poor, leprous meets a bad end, but inwardly rich, attained, unshakable in faith.
It really forces you to question what poor and rich actually mean, what true value is.
So for someone listening now, maybe facing their own difficulties, what's the message about inner strength?
I think it's that cultivating those inner qualities, faith, virtue, wisdom, generosity, that list Suppabuddha gave, provides a kind of wealth that circumstances can't easily destroy. It offers resilience, a core of worth.
That makes sense. It leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it?
Definitely.
How much are our present lives, our experiences, shaped by things we've done, intentions we've held, maybe even from times we don't remember?
Right. How do those unseen currents affect us now and in the future?
It really pushes you to think about what kind of wealth you're cultivating, material or spiritual, and the real impact of your choices, the seen ones and the unseen ones.
A lot to reflect on there.